Okay, planning board, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines will remain off. Go for it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the East Hampton Town Planning Board of November 6, 2024. We are, as you may remember from last time, Sharon McCobb has left the board and left in absence. So we're down to 6 members, and it so happens that 2 of our members, Ed Krug and Bruce Siska, are out tonight. So we have 4 members, which does constitute a quorum. So we will be going forward. We have 3 matters on for site plan review, 1 matter on for sub-waiver review, and we also have proposed changes to the town code regarding a change in the number of units per acre for affordable housing and to correct discrepancies in the code. And that's going to be brought to us, presentations going to be made to us by Eric Shantz. And just so that folks understand, one of the duties of the planning board is to hear changes to the town code such as this, and then to give our opinion is right, but the board's sense of those changes, and that report is delivered to the town board. It's not any kind of public hearing. It's not any kind of there's no public participation in that process. Of course, the members of the public are invited to observe, but the presentation is based on the board's own discussion of the proposed change in the town code. So with that, Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Eric Shantz, I'm the Director of Housing for the town. So I'm just going to give you a quick presentation on this. As the board knows, you already discussed changing the code for senior-only affordable housing developments, and that was approved recently. You've also talked about workforce or employee-sponsored housing. So this is somewhat along those lines, but it's a discussion of non-senior affordable housing units and changing the maximum permitted density for that use. So if you don't mind, if you could just advance. So as I said, you've already discussed other zone changes or changes to the code. So right now the town board is considering changing the density for, again, non-senior affordable housing units. The real reason for that is that doing so will align with what the Suffolk County Health Department permits. The analysis of traffic that we did for senior housing units revealed that the generated traffic is not that large. And then also, this would permit additional affordable housing units on sites that are already deemed appropriate for affordable housing. So specifically, lots that are already designated with the Affordable Housing Overlay District. So if you look at the next slide here, this is very busy. You don't have to know all of these numbers. And in fact, actually, Chris, if you don't mind, if you could just advance one slide. This is a little bit blurry too, but in the packet of information that I provided for the board, and sorry for that, you have this table here. And then if you don't mind, if you just go back one. So this is a little bit of the key information condensed out of that chart. But basically what you have here is a breakdown of all of the existing lots that have the Affordable Housing Overlay District designation. So there's 22 individual sites. If you break them down, sort of categorize them, 3 are vacant, 3 have senior-only affordable housing developments, 5 do not have the required minimum lot area for an affordable housing development, 4 have the minimum lot area but are already improved with other uses, and then there are 7 sites that we have right now that have existing non-senior affordable housing developments on them. So that is basically the summary of all the lots that this code change would affect. Realistically, though, when you look at that, so if you kind of look at those bullet points there, the 3 that are vacant, obviously, any one of those might be developed with a non-senior affordable housing development. If you do change the maximum permitted density of housing units for this use, again, non-senior, The result across those 3 lots would be that the code would permit an additional 25 units over what it would permit right now at a maximum density of 8 units per acre. So that's if you're going up to 12, the addition would be 25. The next category there, senior housing developments. The permitted maximum density for senior housing developments is already 12 units per acre, so there's no change there that would be incurred by this code change. Again, 5 of them do not have the minimum lot area. Unless the code is changed with respect to the lot area requirement, this code change would have no effect on those. 4 of them have the requisite minimum lot area, but they're already improved with other uses. So, for example, 300 Panago Place right here, where a lot of the town staff is. I don't think there's any plan to, remove that use on that site and replace it with an affordable housing development. Same goes for 400 Panago Place, which is the new emergency room that's going in there. So, included in there, technically, you could get 47 additional units across those 4 properties, but I don't think that there's really a realistic, potential for those to be redeveloped. And then if you look at the ones that are already improved with non-senior affordable housing developments, I won't go through every single one there. But basically, you'll see a few of those have no change. They're already, they already could do the maximum amount of units that is permitted under 8 units per acre. So basically what you get when you look at all of these is that the hypothetical maximum number of additional units that would be effectuated by the code change would be 160. I think it's closer to 67, which is basically a summary of the 5 sites that really have a realistic potential for redevelopment, that being a few of the ones that are currently developed within affordable housing development and those that are vacant, but within the affordable housing overlay district. So if you don't mind, Chris, if you could advance 2 slides. So that's basically the potential additional yield of the code change. One of the other main issues here, and you'll remember with senior housing, we talked about the increased sanitary discharge. That is essentially negated by, in this code change, there's a proposal that sewage treatment would be mandatory. I'll get to that in a second, but I basically skipped an evaluation of the impacts of wastewater discharge because it essentially becomes moot. But with additional traffic, and we had done this again when we talked about senior-only affordable housing units, when you use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, which is basically the industry standard, you'll see that, certainly non-senior affordable housing units compared to senior affordable housing units generate more traffic. That's borne out in the numbers that ITE uses in their manual. So I would like to make that point of when we talked about senior-only housing, we were talking about a lot less of a traffic impact. But when you do look at the traffic impact that would be, anticipated for this code change for non-senior housing, what you get is really, so like if you took, for example, here, there's 2, Gansett Meadows, which is the one site that has the largest potential in terms of additional units that could be built if this code change is made. Basically, the effect, if you broke it down over a 10-hour period of the course of a day, what you'd be looking at is an additional vehicular trip every basically 5 minutes, 4 minutes and 56 seconds.
One additional
trip every 5 minutes, roughly.
From the expanded development.
Yeah, over the course of 10 hours for the traffic generated by an additional 18 units on that site, which is what would be permitted by the code change. So, and again, I'll give the caveat I gave it with the senior that's not exactly how most traffic reports are formulated. What they really look at is peak hour volume. Obviously, what you'd anticipate in an affordable housing development, like any other residential use, would be the bulk of those trips being in the morning, the remainder being in the afternoon. It's really something that I don't have the resources to do. It's something you would need a traffic study to pin down. But then it's also unique I mean, those numbers are based largely off the use and the amount of trips that are anticipated for the use, but it is unique to sites. And when you would look at a traffic study, you wouldn't just look at the additional volume, whether it be peak hour or over the course of the day. You would look at it in relation to where that site is located. And it's something that the planning board knows throughout the course of a lot of site plan applications. When you've required a traffic study, they'll do an intersection analysis that shows the anticipated amount of traffic. They'll do a traffic count of existing conditions, but basically come up with an estimate of what they think the impact is going to be on the adjacent roadway based on what that roadway is and the design of the access too. Because one of the things with this is it's not just volume, it's also a question of how is the access, the ingress and egress designed, and what is that going to result in as far as delays from the turning movement. So I want to give you the caveat and say that it's, generally not exactly the way that you calculate those numbers, but the fact of the matter is that you're really not looking at an incredibly large, what I would certainly wouldn't call it a significant adverse impact as a result of the additional traffic.
Just about traffic.
Yeah.
Does the traffic analysis take into account like various factors that are present with overall affordable housing as opposed to senior affordable housing? Because the two that leap to mind are kids going to school every day and folks who are not seniors, who are in their, working people going back and forth to work. And the reason I ask that is because I know you take into account morning and evening folks going to work, but then you factor in kids as well. And you're not going to have continuous 8 hours of traffic, but there are going to be more peaks and fewer valleys in that situation.
Absolutely. Great point. And I'll get to that and I think two slides. So no, but it's a great point. And I have an answer for you.
All right, great.
So the other consideration there, though, is just that really, so again, we're not proposing to change the cap on the maximum number of units on any one site. That would stay at 60. So if you looked at, again, breaking this over the course of, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 10 hours of midday, which again, not exactly the way a planning board would always request to have that information when they get a traffic study. But basically at 60 units, you would be looking at a vehicular trip every basically 90 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds on a weekday. And then it's even less frequent than that on a weekend of about a little over 2 minutes for every vehicular trip. So really the volume that you're seeing of traffic there spread out over the course of a day is not anything that I would think would rise to the level of, a positive declaration on any particular application that would come in front of you. And if you don't mind. So again, a little blurry. Again, you have a clearer version of this in the packet of information that I sent you, but this is, again, a breakdown of every single site in the town that has the Affordable Housing Overlay District designation, which again, this code change would only apply to a use that is only permitted in that overlay district. So this is a full summary of every site. And then basically a calculation of the change of the additional number of vehicle trips that would be permitted as a result of increasing the maximum permitted density from 8 units per acre to 12.
Can I ask a question about this one?
Yeah.
Canwell Court versus former Stearns Department Store. You have 60 at 12 and 47 for former Stearns Department Store, but the numbers on the next columns, what do those numbers mean? I mean, it's
this. We're looking at this chart right here, not this chart. The other one. Okay, so I'm sorry. Point out which one's yours.
so.
And I should have mentioned too. I apologize. Highlighted here on the other chart, highlighted all the sites that are non-senior. On this one, it was an accident. I put the chart from the last time we talked about senior, and the ones that are highlighted are the 3 senior sites.
So in Cantwell Court, second column from the right, it says 94, right? 94.36. So you're right there. You're pointing right there.
Here?
Pointing at it.
From the Antigo, it's like,
That's the
that's line above.
300 Panago.
Cantwell Court is,
Well, okay, I'm sorry, my bad. 26.
Yeah.
Read that.
26.96.
yes.
What does that number mean versus the 107 beneath it, where there are more units at Cantwell and fewer at former Stearns? What do those numbers mean?
Well, really what you're looking at here, these are the numbers for the difference between what would be permitted at 8 units per acre and 12 units per acre. So actually, if you look before the bordered columns here, right here, difference from 8 to 12, Cantwell Court is only 4. You could only get, theoretically right now, Cantwell Court could have been developed with 56 units if it was done as a rental affordable housing complex. We're not developing that site that way. It's going to be 16 family residences. But technically, under the code right now, that has a yield of 56 units.
Sure.
If we change the code to 12 units per acre, I forget the exact number, but I believe they could, in theory, if you did the math, it would be, well, actually, it would be half again more. So it would be, about 80 would be the maximum. But there's a hard cap of 60 on every single lot.
I'm really just, these 4 columns on the right side is what I'm perplexed by. I mean, we can move on. I'm just.
Oh, yeah, no. So anyway, just to show you that why these numbers, why the 26.9 is, way lower than the 107. It's because in theory, if Cantwell Court under the current town code at 8 units per acre were developed as a rental complex of affordable housing development, the maximum yield would be 56.
Got it.
If we change the code, the maximum yield would be 60. It would be an additional 4 units. So the additional generated traffic is low compared to the former Stearns department store, 350 Panago Road, which is not developed. So the yield at 8 units per acre is 31. The yield, if you changed it to 12 units per acre, would be 47. It's a difference of 16. So now you're taking the same
Right.
by 4 times.
I'm a little slow today.
That's all right. That's all
It's been
right.
a tumultuous time.
It's confusing and it's tough to read too. At least certainly on this screen. So. So, and then this is what the chairman was talking about on the next slide. And really one of the key points here are the safeguards with this. So one of the key points here is when we talked about senior affordable housing density, it was basically a straight up change. We were coming in front of you and saying the effective regulation right now is 8 units per acre. We want to go to 12 and just change, basically in the code, cross out where it says 8 and write 12. There were good reasons for that, and that passed. But with this, it's not an exact change. We're not proposing with non-senior because of the, greater intensity of use, more children, more vehicular trips. We're not proposing to do this as a straight up change. What we're proposing is that basically the effective regulation right now would be that it's still 8 units per acre. Unless, and what the code change would do is give this board, the planning board, the authority to consider allowing them to go over 8 units per acre and up to 12. So basically what it is, they would still, obviously any affordable housing development has to come, whether it be a new one or a substantial change to an existing right now under the code, has to come in front of you for a site plan special permit approval. That would stay the same. What this would be an additional special permit that's required if they want to go above 8 units per acre. And as part of that, in order to have that even be considered by the planning board, sewage treatment would be mandatory. You can't get around that with senior housing, the way that the health department calculates the generated sanitary flow. You can do 12 units per acre without sewage treatment if you use TDR and you're in certain areas. With non-senior housing, you can't do that under the health department. The maximum yield on any lot based on groundwater zone in this town would be 8 units per acre. You have to go to sewage treatment if you're going to go to over 8 units per acre. So that's absolutely mandatory and would be a requirement. And then the next one that would be mandatory if someone came in and asked for this from you would be it's called an economic analysis in various parts of the code, but basically a study that shows what the anticipated increased enrollment on the school district that development is located in, what that would be, and give an anticipated impact on the school district. Again, a mandatory requirement of an applicant. And then really the other would be that a full traffic study would have to be submitted. It would have to include a lot of the, the standard things that the planning board asked for, including the level of service that would result on the adjacent roadways and intersections. You've heard that term at various times of, grades between A and E, with A being, not having a deleterious amount of traffic and E being basically a fail. And then other recommendations that were included in there were just guidance rather than mandatory to the board of additional buffers and screening. And one of the other things that would be in there is that it would have to meet all the dimensional requirements, because one of the concerns here, if you're doing a denser development, is not having all of those units sprawl out over the site. So you may find that when somebody comes in, we've done a bunch of affordable housing developments, and you could see from that one slide where it was showing that a bunch of the existing ones have no room. This wouldn't allow them to do any more units because they're at the maximum amount. But if you're going to go, so we have a bunch that were developed at 8 units per acre. If you're going over that, you might get smaller units. They're going to start to spread out. We don't want that to happen. So, they would have to conform to all of the dimensional requirements that an affordable housing development does now. Just because you're allowing more units on the property, we don't want to allow it to spread out more across the property or, have reduced setbacks. So that's something that, I'll give you a heads up that if this code change were done, if you do see an applicant come in here asking for an affordable housing development at 12 units per acre, it's going to be tight on a site. Obviously there's unique things, the shape of the site, the topography, the overall size of it, because again, there's a cap at 60. So it'll be, if you have a 20-acre property, it's going to be a lot easier to fit a development at 12 units per acre, but on some of the smaller ones, it'll be tricky. So I wanted to also give you that heads up that, we didn't have any relief as far as the dimensional regulations, and you will still need to make sure that that development fits on the site. I've done the math of, basically building coverage and size of units. You probably, like using, for example, 350 Panago, if you did the math for that, what you would get is a development that actually looks a lot like a bunch of the condominium complexes that are along this stretch of road here along Panago. But, it'll fit, and you can get units that are probably going to max out around 900 square feet. The range is essentially 400 to 1,200, so that it would fall within that range. But it's a lot of units on a site, and I'm cognizant of that. So, we toyed with the idea of changing some of the dimensional regulations, but really at the end of the day, it should have the same, design as it would now.
Well, it also provides greater flexibility because it's coming before this board, and if a particular application was, let's just say, too big for the space, it's colloquial, but then it would be on this board to, working with the applicant, kind of pare it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let me ask you one other question.
Yeah.
So these are going to come to the board as special permit applications,
Yes.
right? Okay. The usual town code requirements regarding special permit, I don't want to get into what they are, but the applicant's going to have to meet all those as well as this. This is not a substitute for, it wouldn't function, but it's not a substitute for the special permit as contemplated by the town code, right?
Exactly. And not only is it not a substitute, but let's say you had an affordable housing development right now that was 40 units and this enabled them to add 10, right?
Okay.
So it would only be a quarter of the number of units. That doesn't meet the definition of a substantial expansion under the town code, which is an increase in the intensity of use by 50% or more. So you would need to be adding 20 to trigger a substantial expansion, which under the code right now requires them to get a new special permit from the planning board. The way that I worded this is as soon as you ask to go over 8 units, so under that hypothetical of an existing development of 40 units, even if they want to add 1 and they want to go over 8 units per acre, it now triggers a new special permit that activates these specific special permit standards and the general special permit standards.
The whole application, not
Exactly.
just to the added units, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because this, I remember from my time being in front of you every Wednesday that this board sees that a lot of times where you'll get a site plan application. I'm thinking of one in particular in Wayne Scott where there was a question of, does this need a site plan and does this trigger the special permit standards? And in the absence of an application triggering, the need for a new special permit, you're limited to the site plan standards, which are very general, so to speak, and don't give you as much teeth as the triggering of the need for a new special permit would. So again, this is meant to bake in layers of oversight, basically purely in the hands of the planning board, and give you the authority to say no where it doesn't make sense.
Right, okay.
So, and then just very quickly on here, again, affordable housing developments are only permitted in the AHO right now. So just giving you an idea of some of the other safeguards of this. And then the town board controls wherever an AHO goes. So if and when the town adds the AHO designation to other properties, they're going to have to do a full environmental review at that time, considering the hypothetical maximum impact that could be done, which if this code changes goes through, would be at 12 units per acre.
Okay. All right. So the AHOs, anything that comes into an affordable housing overlay district is going to be, it's going to be susceptible to this, any application
Well, any application for,
affordable housing.
yeah, well, for an affordable housing development that's non-senior and wants to go over 8 units per acre.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
Well, no, I'm coming at it from the other angle of just saying this is a code change unique to a particular use that is only permitted in a particular district that can only, and I already gave you a summary of every site that has that designation. The only way this could impact any other properties other than the ones that were listed there is if the town board adds AHOs to other properties.
Under these specific circumstances.
Yes, yeah.
That makes sense.
So
That it?
just other than that, included in here, and I do have a slide that is the specific code changes, if you want to go through them, the specific wording. The town attorney's office did look at it. Rob and John looked at it, but just 2 other things is that the weird things in the code, it's basically cleaning it up. Right now in multiple residence, the special permit standards for it, which in affordable housing development is a type of multiple residence. There's dimensional regulations that, like before I was saying, the maximums, the range of size for the units, they have to be more than 400 square feet, less than 1,200 square feet. For some reason right now under the code, that regulation pertaining only to affordable housing developments is under multiple residents and not under affordable housing development. I propose to take that verbatim from that one section and put it to the use it applies to. And then there's a discrepancy in the code. There's 2 different places that say the minimum lot area. We've always gone by 125,000 square feet. I propose to strike the other one. And then there's also another code regulation, another area of the code that says that the maximum density permitted is 8 units per acre. And obviously the whole point of this code change is to change it to 12 units per acre. So that's it. Other than that, the last slide is basically just saying things that which is that whenever there's a code change proposed, the planning board is required to review it and send comments to the town board. Town board is lead agency. They will prepare the EAF part 2 and 3. We'll send the necessary referral to the Suffolk County Planning Commission and any other involved agency. To my knowledge, the town is the only involved agency. Basically you should just have a discussion about this change. Again, I can put the specific wording up on the screen if you want. It's also in the packet of information that I handed out. But have a consensus about how you feel about it in general, how you feel about the specific provisions, and formulate comments for the town board.
Will we be able to read that if you put it up, you think?
Yes, yeah, that's actually clear, unlike the
Why don't
charts
you do
that
that just so that we can,
Do you mind on the,
I don't want to rely on my memory.
This is the text changes in the code you're looking for? Is that what you
Right
mean?
here.
Yeah, well,
If you scroll down, you'll see.
Oh, that.
let me see what I thought there was like a highlighted version of it.
speak a little
Yeah,
slow?
it's just slow.
There we go.
Yeah, just scroll down.
Yeah, there you go. It's gonna show.
Yeah, we got it.
There we go.
We have it up here, but that'll be fine.
Right there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. All right, good. All right, thanks. Okay, anyone want to,
Yeah, I could start it off.
go, thank you, appreciate that.
So, Eric, it was really useful to get all those tables where it lists all the different affordable housing projects that are in place now or could be developed. And I know this really is not pertinent to the language that we're reviewing today, but practically speaking, there are only 3 properties that could be affected by the 12 units. And of those, it's kind of unlikely. One of them is pretty unlikely, the fire department, from what I hear. So it's really only 2. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and again, and I should have mentioned too, when the environmental assessment is done, for the town board, we're going to consider the worst case scenario. So, and that's what I put in this presentation too, is, in theory, 160 additional units could be built. I then tried to be, come up with a number that was realistic, but not all the way to the end of what I think, would actually happen, and came up with 67 because of the essentially 2 of the vacant lots and then 3 of the ones that are already developed. But yeah, I mean, right away, as you said, Amagansett Fire Department has not expressed any interest in it. 350 Panago is privately owned, and there isn't a plan to do a traditional affordable housing development there. Route 114 is a town-sponsored project, or actually I should say through the East Hampton Housing Authority. That right now proposes to do 50 units per acre. In theory, this code change would allow them to do an additional 10 units to get up to the maximum 60, but right now there's no plan to do that. So realistically, everything I know of all those 3 vacant units is this would not affect them. I think the 3 that it would affect are possibly Whalebone Village could increase by 12 units, although if I put that up on an aerial here and you looked at that site layout, you'd see that that's pretty well developed.
Yeah.
So I don't know that you could get an additional 12 units in there. Springs Fireplace Apartments is very much more, has some open space where they could add, again, an additional 12 units in theory. And then Gansett Meadows additionally could do 18, but they're also very tightly developed in terms of the actual coverage on that lot. So
Yeah, so we're not, when we're thinking about, this proposed code change, we're not thinking that it's going to affect 67 or 167 units. That's really theoretical.
Yes.
And practically speaking, unrealistic. It's only going to affect 3 current parcels of land in town, unless other land is designated
exactly,
affordable housing.
exactly.
Okay, so the other point I wanted to make was that in the legal language, the way I read it, it seems to allow workforce housing, or not distinguish between workforce housing and affordable housing. So for instance, 350 Panago, where there's been a proposal made in front of this board to build workforce housing where corporations or business establishments would buy the units and then rent them out or have them available for their employees. They could do it using this language, use it as affordable housing. They wouldn't have to designate it as a workforce housing. It will go into any explanation as to how those units are going to be designated. According to this legal language, they could build those units. I think it's 47, the maximum that would go on that property, and then use them as they have proposed to use them. Should we not make a distinction between that type of affordable workforce housing and?
There is though. So yes, to answer part of your question, anyone who owns that site, if this code change was made, could do, in theory, a development of up to 12 units per acre. That proposal, though, which is still kind of a work in progress, there are other elements to it that would not meet the definition of an affordable housing development. So,
What?
so a central governing body. So that idea, at least in its current form, is to have condo units on the site that can be sold to businesses so that they can rent them out to their employees. That's the first thing. With an affordable housing development, you can't have the initial offering price be more than what is defined as the limit of an affordable housing unit. So right there's a cap on the initial price that you can charge someone for a housing unit. The workforce housing, which isn't really the best term for it, but we'll use it for sake of ease. But that would not have a cap on the initial sales price of the units. So they wouldn't qualify as affordable housing units, can't be permitted in the affordable housing overlay district. The other side of that of price is rent. My understanding is they are proposing under that other idea to cap the rent the same way that an affordable housing development would be at 130% of FMR. So that matches it. One of the other ways it's different is that under the affordable housing development, it has to be designed basically as one governing body. You see that with the East Hampton Housing Authority when they build one of these developments and then they manage it. That other idea has a model where those units would be sold to individual businesses, and that's somewhat of a work in progress as to how. I mean, with all of that other use right now, it's still being discussed. It hasn't been refined, so it's sort of difficult to. I can answer the differences of an affordable housing development and that idea as to where it is today, as far as I know, or where it was at the last town board meeting. But that's really the initial sales price. And then also the other main thing is that under that other idea, the workforce, is that they wouldn't have a cap on the income of the tenants that can be in the development. With an affordable housing development, you have to have, there's an income cap. It's the town's definition of a moderate income family, which is up to 130% of area median income based on household size. So really the initial sales price and not capping the income of the tenants are the two main ways in which it diverges. So anyone who owned 350 Panago or any other lot that had an AHO designation and was vacant, this code change would allow them to do 12 units per acre, which I understand that other project wants to do. But some of the other key elements of what they want to do on that site right now, as I understand it, they couldn't do. You know what I mean? As they wouldn't be an affordable housing.
You would have to abide by just regular standard zoning
Exactly.
codes. Okay.
Yeah, they could do, I mean, that's a shorter way of abbreviating my rambling is, they could do an affordable housing development at 12 units per acre, but they're not proposing to do an affordable housing development right now for a number of reasons, a number of aspects of what they're proposing.
So what I understand you to say is the one thing that would prevent them from doing it is that there isn't one governing body that
That's not the only thing.
That's not the only.
There are a number of factors. That's one factor. And the one that I think it could be the most distinguishing aspect, I mean, that's very distinguishing because it's how it's governed, but it's the cap on the income. Because if you recall from the conversation that we had with and workforce housing is a colloquialism that we're using here, right? There's nothing in the town code called workforce housing.
That's correct.
It's just what it was called in conversation. But as I recall,
it describes a particular way of using those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not arguing with that. It's a
right.
decent name, but it's just not an official name,
Right.
as opposed to affordable housing, which is a real name.
They would use affordable housing, but then use it differently than what we understand affordable housing.
Well, what we have as affordable housing is a thing in the town code. It's a defined thing.
Right.
But, and from what I was just hearing Eric say, to my hearing of it, it's the cap on income that really distinguishes it. Because if you recall from the conversation we had about that workforce quote-unquote workforce housing proposal, a number of the units were expected to be used by folks at the emergency room.
Right.
And that includes doctors. And those doctors presumably are going to have incomes that are going to exceed the affordable housing cap.
Yep.
So,
But they could conceivably eliminate people who, they could stay within the cap if they only made it available to certain types of,
they being the owners of the units,
right.
I
To me,
suppose.
the only thing that really prevents them from doing it is to have one governing body on.
Yeah, no, that's a
Because
big,
what they're doing is they're selling it to individual businesses.
yeah, no,
And
and
that's
the
not-
individual businesses are the ones who are going to determine
Right.
the policies of those properties.
And that's not the only thing, but I mean, I should really make a point that that's sort of to be determined
Right.
at this point as far as the management structure of it. You know, again, as Sam was saying, affordable housing development is an existing use, you know, and we're looking to change the regulations for that. The workforce or employer sponsored or employee housing development, whatever it may come to be called, it's still a work in progress. It's still something that we're trying to hammer out all of the regulations for, and among that is the management structure and how it's going to be overseen. But you know, and I spent a little too much time on it, but it diverges from a traditional affordable housing development where, you know, normally what you see is, you know, Windmill or East Hampton Housing Authority as an entity, building it, managing it, you know, overseeing all the placement of it. With the workforce housing development, that model generally is condo units that are going to be sold to businesses, you know, multiple times. And do they create a condo board? Does the town run it in some aspect? You know, those are all open questions. But really the differences are the initial sales price is capped for an affordable housing development. It wasn't being proposed to be capped with workforce, and the income limit on the tenants. There is a 130% of AMI income limit on an affordable housing development. And as Sam was saying, the vision for that other use was that there might be doctors or people that make more than that limit, so it should accommodate them as well.
Can I ask one other question? As a practical matter, if this AHO proposal, these town code changes go through, and they will apply to 350 Panago, correct?
That's correct.
Does that preclude the workforce housing proposal that has been discussed at this board and also by the town board?
No.
It wouldn't. It could still,
Yeah, I mean, right now, it was discussed in front of the town board, and where I am with it right now is that would be a completely separate use and probably a different overlay district. Because the problem with that use, again, there being no cap on initial sales price and no cap on the, income limit on the tenants, the units would not meet the definition of an affordable housing unit, which is a definition in the town code, which is related to the maximum price. And the tenants wouldn't meet the definition of a moderate income family, which is a definition in the town code that is limited by their income. So basically, it is not affordable housing as the same as defined in the town code. So
That's true with regard to the proposal that they made at 350 Panago. But isn't it conceivable that they could change that proposal, or someone else could come up with the idea where they would meet those caps that you're talking about?
then they don't need a different use definition or a different overlay. They're doing an affordable housing development.
They don't need it.
Housing.
There's already something in the town code. It just doesn't let you go to 12 units per acre unless this code change is adopted.
And I do think, I'm sorry to pipe in, I think we should focus on the affordable housing overlay.
Yeah. No, I don't want, we've kind of
board
diverted our
needs to comment.
conversation. Only because, as Lou pointed out, as a
One of
practical
the-
matter, there's only 3 parcels
Yeah.
in town, and one of them is, at this stage of the game, Amagansett, not likely to become housing.
And I will say too, I mean, and I said this with the senior only housing too, that's one of those things where there's like a good and a bad side of the fact that I don't think this will have a big impact right now. Obviously, it's a good thing if the code change doesn't have this huge impact and there's going to be thousands of new housing units in the town. It's also a bad thing in the sense that we want more affordable housing units throughout the town. So I think that at the end of the day, this would probably more affect the future. And when the town board goes to look at other sites
buying
to
more
add.
land and doing this, absolutely.
To add more.
Okay.
So anyway, just
Anything
one
else?
more comment. So in the proposed language, the language that you listed in your packet, I'm a little confused. So you later mentioned that there are 4 items that would be incorporated, and would be on page 10 of 11. You would need this new, like we've spoken about, new special permit, a traffic study, sewage treatment, economic analysis. Those items, I think, are very important and pertinent to all this. And, I'm glad they're in there, and I would require that they be in there. But I don't see that in the proposed code language that you're listing here.
If you go to page 7 of that memo, on the bottom. So actually, Chris, do you mind if you read it from the start of that page there?
In a different ink.
Yeah, and I tried to give you the code changes in green where they were.
Yeah, we got them. We have them up here too.
But basically, so everything in green here is new. And basically, what we're saying here, this says, all of the, and again, this is what it says right now, all the dimensional regulations are those that are of the MF multifamily district. That's what the code says now. Those are the setbacks, coverage, all of that. We would just add, except for B and E herein, which is minimum lot size, because we moved that from another section of the code. So now it's in with the other stuff that it actually applies to. So except for that, because that MF zone has regulations that apply to traditional condo developments, which we want to keep capped at 8 units per acre. And except for E, which is the one about the density, which is also in the use table from MF zone, caps it at 8 units per acre. Other than those, everything's the same as it was as far as the dimensional regulations. And then here, what it says is basically the maximum permitted densities are, and then it says 12 units for non-senior units. And then here it goes, increased density for non-senior apartments, where the planning board finds that you can meet the general and specific special permit standards. You can permit up to 12 units per acre in an affordable housing development. However, if you do that, you must do the following 4 things: require sewage treatment, a new special permit is required, the analysis of the school district, and the traffic study. So that's where it is in that section.
All right, thank you.
Michael?
When you came to us before, talking about increasing number of units per senior housing, and you admonished us greatly for do not mention non-senior housing. I think we discussed how there's a bit of a tension between developing senior housing or affordable workforce housing. Can, for example's sake, the 350 Panago, could that be 75% affordable, 25% senior housing? Is that something that can consider?
Yes, and worked into the code there. In fact, actually, Chris, if you don't mind, again, if you put that up, is a consideration of if somebody wants. It's uncommon that happens, mostly because of the outside funding that is sought when you're developing one of those sites. It's uncommon to mix senior and non-senior, but it happens on occasion. But for consideration of that, I forget exactly where it was. Hold on. Yes, okay. If you go up, keep going. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, okay, there you go. That is something that was actually changed when we did the senior housing. Is what I said was at the end here, where there's a mix of senior and non-senior housing units, that the maximum permitted density will be permitted under essentially what is this health department calculation for the maximum permitted density, which really relates to 8 units per acre for every non-senior housing unit and up to 12 units per acre for every senior housing unit. So basically it's, you take the yield of the entire property, figure out, what the generated sanitary flow, and this is regardless of having, you still need sewage treatment, but you basically treat it as if you weren't doing sewage treatment. What would the maximum number of units that the health department would permit on this lot be based on the mix of those? And then that would be your maximum yield. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Jen, you have anything?
Thank you for preparing this and walking us through all of this. I think that, I don't know if we're going to be
Well, we're going to make some comments.
I think we kind of covered
Yeah.
all of the questions, clarifications I had.
All right. I would associate myself, anything else that you want? Yeah. I would associate myself with Lou's comments, and for the purposes of the board's comments to the board, to the town board, I would say that we're all in favor of this proposal and these legislative changes. And I think that the board likes that it's a special permit application because because it will meet the special permit requirements already in the town code. And the fact that authority to exceed 8 units rests with the planning board, which is maybe it's a little we're thanking the town for this, but don't say thank you, you may regret it. But I think that it's important that this kind of an application where you're going to exceed 8 units, it's exactly the kind of decision that the planning board should be making. And so and again, I hope I'm speaking for everybody.
Yes.
We like that. We think that that's a good addition. We think that all the safeguards that are already in the proposed legislation on page 7 are good, and we endorse those as well.
Yep.
And did I say already that we endorse the fact that it's the existing special permit, that it's additional requirements above and beyond special permit requirements, which we are glad to see will apply regardless. Is that give you enough to be able to give the town board comments that will be meaningful to the town board?
I believe
We
so.
hope. You good?
Yep.
Anybody else?
No.
Good?
Good.
All
good.
right. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do we have the applicant on the Hampton's church matter here? They're not here?
There were people here a few minutes ago, maybe they stepped out.
Oh, that was,
Oh, that was something.
Maybe we should do Spring General.
let's do Springs General Store then.
Well,
I'm
then,
sorry?
Setting a public hearing.
Well, yeah, we have a resolution, but we also,
It is a quick discussion.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just stay here. It is. Just give us 1 second, please, and we'll get started. It's 29 Old Stone Highway. See you back there. And then you should go look for the people. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. This is the application for Springs General Store. It is a site plan. The location Chris is bringing up on the screen, 80 Old Stone Highway in Springs. The site plan is to convert an existing storage shed into a wine sales location, add an indoor table with 4 seats to an existing takeout food store, maintain existing outdoor seating for patrons, and abandon an existing kayak use. The subject parcel is zoned neighborhood business and developed with a 2.5-story retail building known as the Springs General Store. A burst water pipe during the site plan review timeframe resulted in some damage to the building, so there's also internal renovations that are being done. And the store is actually also going to come into ADA compliance with the proposed improvements. A few quick things. The last time this board saw the application was in April 2024. At that time, the applicant was referred to ZBA for the natural resource special permit, and the board had only a few minor comments left with respect to the site plan. They have since obtained their special permit as of September 24th, 2024, and had alerted the board to that on October 4th, 2024. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of the final comments that the board issued to the applicant with respect to the planning issues. And here they go. So the applicant had removed the request for on-site consumption The board will recall that part of the application had originally been wine sales in the new wine retail location. The applicant had changed course during the site plan, I think in part due to concerns heard, and that is no longer part of the application, and they just removed those references from the documents. They have satisfied that comment that the board made. The next comment was to address some details regarding traffic flow, aisle dimensions. Those have also been addressed. We do note here that there are some existing challenges to site navigation, but they're existing, and there's really no comment there. A lighting plan needed some small revisions. Those have been successfully implemented, and the lighting plan is now acceptable. They've got their NRSP, which was a big hurdle that they have overcome. There are some conditions of the NRSP which will also be of interest to the board. A revised site plan that depicts construction practices in place to protect adjacent wetlands, and the revegetation plan that would be acceptable to the zoning board or their delegate. The re-veg is close. I think there was just some minor tweaks. And then the applicant has also satisfied the last comment, and they've gotten a DEC title wetlands permit. With all of those issues addressed, including the withdrawal of the request to have the on-site consumption and all the other issues addressed, the planning department recommends that the application is complete and ready to be scheduled for a public hearing. It is a type 2 action pursuant to SECRA, so there's no further work to be done there. Thank you.
Does the applicant have anything they wish to add?
No, I know you have this on at a later time of the meeting.
No, we group them.
Yeah.
So you
If after the conversation here, I will move over to the regular meeting and take up the resolution. But did you have any comment or anything you want to respond to the planning department? All right, in that case, we'll have our conversation amongst ourselves. All right, go ahead. Well, I need Tina to come back. But all right. Okay, go ahead. She'll be coming right back. She's looking for the other applicant on that other matter.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the important item for me that was resolved was the on-site consumption, and I appreciate the applicant's willingness to resolve that issue by eliminating that request. The more important issue for me was the IA system that the applicant has agreed to install, and I assume that's...
subject to the grant continuing to be available. That's always been the position of the applicant. Zoning Board of Appeals understands that. Attorney's Office understands that. You gentlemen have accepted that before. This is an awful lot of money being spent at this property. We're not putting an IA system in because the health department regulations do not require it, because we're not changing the design flow. However, if the town grant continues to be available, although it will not cover all of it, because this is a commercial septic system, which would mean for things like grease traps and stuff like that, and it'll have to be something separate. If the grant continues to be available, because they do it on a rolling basis, they granted it once, so as long as those monies continue to be available, we'll put that IA system.
what is the status of that grant right now?
They granted it, but it has to be renewed.
Do you happen to know if it's where
What's
it
the
is?
status?
It would be really great if they can go to the podium, please. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, talk to the mic.
Gentlemen, it doesn't matter, we're not putting it in.
I understand that, but we just want to satisfy ourselves with respect to that.
They granted it once. It's been going on so long, they have to review it again. The indications are, given where the site is, the fact that we're trying to retrofit this thing and bring it back into the community, that the request to renew the grant should be smiled upon.
Absent a substantive change in the application that would, alter the decision, I'm not sure why they would choose to rescind it. I mean, it's already been supported, right? And for the reasons Mr. Bennett referred to, it's in a very sensitive watershed, right next to the harbor. It's the right thing to do for the property. I don't think we have to have a debate about this. You've got the grant. I don't see any reason we're going to recommend otherwise.
No, I just want everyone to make sure that,
That it's not a condition, that it's nothing that you're positing your application on.
we're doing everything.
If it's there, you'll do it.
Retrofitting, we're doing ADA, where no prior applicant has been required to.
Right, no, I'm just talking about the grant.
I'm just saying to you that, that if you're conditioning it on a new wastewater system when the health department regulations, as we've demonstrated, does not require one, that condition in turn has to be conditioned upon the continued availabiliation of the grant money. That's all. That's all.
And as far as you know, it continues to be available.
Yeah, I don't know why the town wouldn't continue.
Right, I think that's as much as a discussion as we need to have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, on the record.
Conclusion.
Thank you.
Also, coming into compliance with ADA is a common thing
Well,
that
yeah,
happens
sure.
here.
No, but I wanted to, I mean, very
Yeah.
clear about this. The last three operators, despite the fact that the ADA statutes were in effect, have not been required to come into ADA compliance.
Well, that's,
Trying to be good citizens.
yeah.
Okay, well, Mr. Bennett, we appreciate your willingness to be a good citizen.
Yeah, I just wish you didn't have to take so long.
Yeah,
Well,
but we're there, and let's be happy for that.
well, all right, let me ask you a question about that, because you wrote a very strong letter on this. All right, let me ask you something. This application came in on April 15th, 2022. There was submission on June 2nd, 2022. There were a number of public comments, and on September 29th, 2022, it went to the Disabilities Advisory Board, and the Planning Department issued a memo on September 22nd, 2022, and this board had its discussion on September 29th, 2022. And then there were public comments submitted in the end of September. Then nothing happened. And then on January 2nd, 2023, we got a letter from you asking for additional time. And then 6 months later, on actually almost 7 months later, on June 28th, 2023, we got a submission from the applicant. And then on July 21st, 2023, we have another applicant submission. And then there were fire marshal's comments in September. And the planning department made a memo on September 29th, 2023, and the planning board issued its decision on October 11th, 2023. So in the period from the time that the initial application was made in February and then came before the board after a number of public comments, that's September, and we have 4 months before we get a submission from the applicant.
All in response to requests made by you.
Well, that's what we do. We make requests.
You're not supposed to take this long on an application where there's absolutely no, listen, I was a planning board lawyer
I know you
35
are.
years ago.
I know.
I know how quickly these things are supposed to move. Sam, if you will, I know how quickly these things are supposed to move. This is an application that doesn't increase by 1 square foot any of the buildings at the property. I'm taking a shed that's the size of a parking lot and putting a conforming use in there. I'm offering all sorts of mitigation. You took forever to send it to the zoning board of appeals.
Listen.
No, I took 6 months to respond to your responses.
To our questions.
Slow rolled this thing.
We did not. I object to that, and I think you're in. Listen, John,
the record will show. Why are we having this argument?
That we had a meeting, and then 6 months later, you gave us a letter, and then we had another meeting, and then it took another 7 months.
Yeah, because we're trying to respond to these ridiculous comments that
Well, you see, that's the issue. You see, you think they're ridiculous, but meanwhile, we gave you virtually 2 hours at each meeting. We said repeatedly that we understood that this was an important application. We did not slow roll this. We gave this application the attention it deserves. Let me finish. Let me finish. We gave this application the attention it deserved because the Springs General Store is such an important asset in this community, and because we want to see it done and done right, and because
3 seasons, Sam.
that is not accurate to blame us. Okay, you had problems with the facility.
Can differ. It's totally accurate.
Let me tell you something. When you write a letter like you wrote,
please.
and you blame us for the delays that cannot be put on us,
You're to blame.
No, we're not. We are not to blame.
Sure. This is like, this is right now, Sam, has got to be, I know you are, what am I?
No, actually, what it's
please
gotten
set the
to is
public
the
hearing
point that
down.
you're trying to impose upon this board issues and delays that were not our cause. We did not do it.
We're just
It was the nature of the application, an application which, by the way, received a tremendous amount of public, not public hearing comment, but the public, no, not public hearing, but there were concerns that this board, that you ultimately agreed to change the application with.
Move it along. A lot of them,
Well,
just to move it along.
Look, John, Mr.
Sam,
Bennett.
why don't we just agree to disagree, please?
If you want to
okay?
agree to disagree,
Let's just leave it at that.
what we want to do is we want to have we're going to move to the resolution. I want to make sure that the board's comments are finished being spoken, and then we will go on. But what I'm trying to tell you is that when you take 6 months to respond,
Leave it.
don't
I
blame
thought
us
we agreed to
because it's
disagree,
that big.
Sam. Come on.
You know why? Because you wrote this letter. This letter is in the record, and now you don't want me to respond to it.
You said you disagree with the letter. Do you have to say anything more?
Well,
I'm
yes,
not going to stand
because
up here
what
as an applicant and be berated, Sam. I think that your board it's been criminal how long it's taken you to move these things along.
No, don't do it.
I'm using that rhetorically.
Yeah, well, you know what? You wrote a letter that had a lot of rhetoric in it, okay? And the rhetoric, though, it was the most egregious.
Oh,
come on, John. You know and I know that you're trying to
get
make
out of
this.
the kitchen, Sam.
John,
please
listen to me. You're trying to make it like it's our fault that you had an application that had a lot of aspects to it, okay? It had a lot of aspects to it.
Some of it is, Sam. Some of it is. Some of it is. And you and I will just respectfully, because we've known one another for a long time,
Yes, we have known each other for a
respectfully
long time, and
disagree.
we worked together for a long time outside of this building.
We will
Yes.
respectfully disagree.
Absolutely.
And right now,
Respectfully, yes.
all we're talking about is you establishing a date for a public hearing, which is perfunctory. Please, let's just get there.
Well, listen, I'll leave it at this. You're the one who mentioned the time issues just now.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Properly. I wouldn't be representing my
then
client
if
if I
you're
had.
going to mention the time issues, I'm going to respond.
And you have.
And I have. Lou, do you have anything else?
No, I'm glad that we're finally coming to an end.
Does any board member have anything that they want to add before we take up the resolution?
I would just like to reaffirm how important it was for me, and I think lots of others, that the on-site consumption be removed from the plans. That was number one in a lot of people's
A
minds.
permitted use, by the way, as affirmed by your building department. But, and again, we understood that there was some consternation. We had absolutely no
We don't
legal
need to debate this. Next, let's move on.
Okay. Jen, do you have anything you want to add?
I was not here for much of the discussion about this application. Thank you. But I have to say I'm in favor of this application. I think it's a great use for a great space, and I'd like to move on to the public hearing.
Lou?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the matter of the application of the Springs General Store 2 site plan, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 300-80-2-1, is scheduled for public hearing. A public hearing is hereby scheduled to be held at Town Hall, 159 Pantago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, December 4, 2024, at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the said application. I have read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passed 4-0
See
with
you
a
on the
quorum.
4th. Thank you.
Have a great Thanksgiving. All right.
Thank you.
Find those other, did they find the church?
The church, yeah, where are the representatives of that church? Well, I guess Mr. Halsey's going to just jump to the front of the line. Okay, you're here on the
Close.
Springs Close Highway? Okay, very good.
Okay, so we'll move to Pinkerton first.
I'm sorry?
Pinkerton, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, Chris, you have to appreciate that I remember things, differently. This is the Springs Close Highway application.
All right, all clear?
You're on.
Okay, this is the Pinkerton Farm site plan evaluation. This application was last reviewed July 24, 2024. And here's the subject parcel is 92 Spring Close Lane in East Hampton. It is zoned A residential. It's 60,861 square feet, 1.4 acres. The parcel takes access from Spring Close Highway to the west. Just south of the site is an agricultural reserve area, which also includes this property. There's a small residential development to the southeast of the property. Residences to the north and the east, and the parcels within the South Fork groundwater protection area. Just to provide some background on this application. Just going to pull up the plan here. So the site plan application has been made to legalize the existence of a 681 square foot pergola and a 1,200 square feet of raised planter beds sited on gravel. The site is occupied by Spring Close Farm, and site plan approvals have been most recently issued on May 1st, 2024 for the installation of a new IA wastewater treatment system and bathroom in the newly reconstructed barn. The pergola and raised planter beds are actually not subject to this review, which I'll get into. However, the gravel area requires this site plan approval. So the issues for discussion tonight will be focused on the planning board comments from the last hearing, going over the comment response and then the planning department's assessment. So the first comment from the last hearing was that the applicant should amend plans to demonstrate dimensional compliance for the pergola and other structures that would require legalization through this application. And the applicant has done such and indicated setbacks of 3.7 feet from the property line and requested a setback waiver, given that the requirement would be 8 feet. Also mentioned that the other structures mentioned in the initial review will be removed and therefore have not been indicated on the survey. This includes an outdoor shower, outdoor sink, portable restroom, and camper. So upon the review, the planning department notes that the site plan approval dated August 10, 2022 legalized all the accessory structures on site, including the pre-existing pergola, which we're talking about tonight. And given the new pergola is considered reconstruction in place in kind of that formerly approved pergola, this one that we're talking about tonight is not subject to site plan approval. That's given it was reconstructed based on a pergola that was previously approved in 2022. The new structure will still be subject to review by the Architectural Review Board, as well as require a building permit. The next comment from the planning board was that the applicant should revise the coverage calculation, and the applicant stated that the town code exempts previous driveways from the coverage calculation on agricultural properties, and the planning department acknowledges that the applicant is correct and that this correction is now in the record. Lastly, the third and final comment was regarding that the applicant should revise their application to include the necessary elements of a site plan identified by the planning department as modified by the board during their discussion. And the applicant response details regarding the necessary elements of a site plan that the revised submission meets requirements to show structures with dimensions and setbacks. And the applicant has also stated that the following items from the planning department review are not applicable and have not been provided in the past. These items I'll list. So beginning with the location of easements, utility lines, and fire hydrants, the layout of parking, curbing, and drainage with specifications and computations of requirements, as well as the elevation drawings of the existing pergola. Also, regarding outdoor lighting, the applicant mentioned that there is site lighting that has been approved by the Architectural Review Board in the past, and there's a light above the sign on the store and light fixtures on the approved barn. Also, It is mentioned that a comprehensive lighting plan should not be necessary given the alterations do not exceed 25% of the gross floor area of existing structures. With respect to the agricultural easement, it is properly labeled given the entire property is within the easement. So the planning department's assessment is that regarding outdoor lighting, the planning department was not able to locate the prior approvals for exterior lighting from the ARB. The applicant should submit the approval reference for file. Similarly, the most 3 recent site plan approvals did not contain any outdoor lighting information on this site. The applicant should submit lighting details in accordance with the planning board guidelines for exterior lighting that meet town code requirements. However, the planning board can consider waiving the requirement for these details to be submitted and should note that the details have not been required in the past site plans, and this project does not propose any additional outdoor lighting. Therefore, that could waive as good cause. Regarding the requirement for the elevation drawings of the pergola, these are no longer necessary given it's been determined that it's not subject to this review, the pergola. Lastly, the planning department is satisfied with the other necessary elements of a site plan given the subject structures don't exceed the 25% and they have been updated with dimensions and setbacks indicated properly. The entire properties in that agricultural reserve as indicated on the survey, and the other elements not provided are considered not applicable for this application and have not been required in the past. Those are the ones I mentioned: the fire hydrants, layout of parking and drainage structures with specifications and their computations. Moving on to the other 2 issues, as mentioned, the Architectural Review Board will require approval for the pergola, and the Planning Department also notes that in finding the agricultural easement for this property has been filed. No restrictions in that document were found to be relevant to the scope of this work proposed. However, for future activities, the conditions of the easement should be noted, in particular the condition that no residential development is permitted on the subject parcel, and the easements attached for reference online. So in conclusion, the existing pergola is not subject to this review. However, the gravel surrounding the raised planter beds and pergola do require site plan approval. The planning board should discuss whether they will require details to be provided regarding the existing exterior lighting on site. The board should also discuss whether they agree with the planning department's assessment of necessary submission items for a site plan that have been complied with. And lastly, the planning board should determine whether the proposal is ready for approval, as it can be considered a minor site plan if the board decides to waive the holding of a public hearing.
Thank you very much, Chris. Mr. Halsey.
Good evening, Joel Halsey on behalf of the property 92 Spring Close Highway. I guess the only thing really that was relevant or that might need to be discussed tonight would just be the lighting. And I believe, I don't know if you got it, I was on the site yesterday to take pictures of all the lighting. There are actually 5 lighting fixtures, 1 above the sign and 2 to each side of the door of the big barn, medium-sized barn and small barn. They are fully shielded and all downlit. It's all downlighting. So I don't know if any, and there was there was a plan in the ARB file that was on part of the elevations that showed the lighting. However, since I've had to go to the ARB for a modification because the barn is in a different design than was approved by the ARB, and that's kind of what triggered the pergola and the raised flower beds here to come back to the planning board to get approval for that, to go back to the ARB to get approval for the modification of the design of the barn and the pergola and the raised flower beds. They would have to review the lighting as well, again, because they had approved it originally as part of the original approval, and now it's going to be part of the modification. As you can see, the 5 fixtures are all dark sky compliant with the town and comply with the town code.
There you have them all code compliant. I just want to confirm with planning.
We don't have any details on the outdoor lighting.
I only submitted pictures of the lighting today. I do not have the spec sheets, but I can ask the owner if he has them. But I mean, it's pretty obvious by looking at them that they're.
Assuming that they are, when I'm assuming that they are,
Yeah.
then I think that that's fine.
Okay.
Just so the board knows, this application, I guess, was Sharon's at some point. Was Sharon the?
I think Sharon was
This was
the lead,
hers,
yeah.
and in her absence, it falls to me. So, ordinarily it would fall to the vice chair, but, yeah, no, but the lighting is the only issue, and I'm good with it, so. Anybody else have any comments, anything they want to add? I'm going to run the questions real quick. We'll get to is public hearing one of the questions on this?
Do we
Yes.
want to waive, I think?
Yeah, if it is, then we'll get to it. All right, does the planning board wish to waive the requirements for exterior lighting details to be submitted? Submit.
That's something.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you have them, right?
Okay. I have the pictures, but I'll see if I can. I'm sure he must have the specs somewhere. I'm not sure. I mean, by looking at him, I wouldn't be able to tell.
Okay, I'd just like to have them in the.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Does the planning board wish to waive the requirements for elevation drawings of the pergola? And I'm good with that.
I'm fine
It's a
with
pretty
that. Yeah,
flat, it's a pretty flat parcel. Does the planning board agree with the planning department's assessment of necessary elements of the site plan? I guess have been met, and the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is yes.
Yes.
And we don't have the question about the public hearing, but
Was there a public hearing on this before? on the barn?
Originally, there was for the barn.
Yeah,
do we agree that there's no need for a public hearing on this?
I agree.
I agree.
Agree. There you are.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll get you the spec sheets for the.
Yeah,
lighting.
just so that the record is,
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Let's look, we have one more, we have two more matters on, for work session. One of them is, Eco Farm, which is, it's Eco Acres, I'm sorry, which is going to be adjourned, well, not adjourned, but it's going to be addressed lightly. And I'll let Tina do that in a moment. The other matter that we have on is the Hampton's Church. If the applicant isn't here, I don't want to have the matter, I don't want the discussion to be held.
Took a walk around, I didn't.
You don't see him,
anything
look,
around. I don't know.
and they knew, was that the applicant who was here, as
I
far
don't
as they know?
know. They're notified on Friday via email and phone. Yeah.
I messaged him today confirming that we are on.
So they know that it's on. I don't want the board to take up the matter without them here, whatever the reason might be that they're not here. Because the application, this was Ed's matter, and in Ed's absence, I'm covering for it. And I visited the site, and I've read Chris's report, and I have a number of questions. I don't want this board to take up the application without the applicant here. I don't think it would be, I think there are due process issues if we do that. So we're going to adjourn that. If they show up before we adjourn the meeting, we'll take it up. But given the nature of this is the first time this is on, this particular?
Correct. Yeah, initial submission.
Okay, if this is the first time that this is on, and I know I have questions, and I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to take it up. So with that, we'll hear from Tina regarding Eco Acres, which is also going to be a 1-2. At least that's my belief.
Yeah.
And we're taking up, explain why we're taking up Eco Acres with the applicant not here. So that, because, I don't want to be inconsistent.
And I'm going to I'll bring up a map of where the property is. So it's at 199 Bull Path. And the reason we're going to discuss this without the applicant knows in this case that we are going to discuss it, declined to attend. Since the matter was last heard by the board, I think it was in May of 2024, several months ago, we have had some back and forth between the planning department, the town attorney's office, and the applicant regarding requirements in the code for reserve areas and scenic easements which are covered in a few different sections of code. There was some conflicting language that we were just kind of working through during those months. The result of those analysis efforts are a confirmation that in this application, a reserve area must be utilized to meet the open space requirement because it's an open space subdivision. There was some thought that an easement could be required, but after careful review and it's in the open space subdivision code, the land area preserved as open space pursuant to those criteria cannot be within a lot. So by the applicant proposing to put in a lot, it violated that. So the applicant has submitted a new subdivision map with, I looked at it quickly, a compliant approach to meeting the open space requirements. And because it took us a while to work this issue out, we'll have them on for the next meeting and we'll review that application and its compliance with the rest of the subdivision code criteria.
The applicant knows all about this and is on board with
And the
it.
applicant knows and has concurred with the finding regarding reserved areas and is planning to see us on the 20th.
Anybody have any questions for Tina on this?
Nope.
Okay,
No.
very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we have covered all the matters that are on our regular meeting. We did the one, in the work session, we did the regular meeting matter, which was the Springs General Store resolution. So, before we adjourn, or take a motion to adjourn, I've read the planning board meeting minutes of October 23rd, 2024, and I move for their adoption. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passed 4-0. And with that, if someone will make a motion, we can go home.
Motion.
Tina makes a motion. Is there a second?
I'm Jennifer.
Sorry, Jen. Sorry about that. Jen makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.